What up, nerds? Welcome to where comics and cards collide with Team Nerd Herd, where we will discuss the current resurgence of the trading cards or the comic book trading cards and how you can get in on the action. And today we have a very special guest and a personal friend of mine. Welcome to the show, Sam. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Alonzo.
All right. Do you want to tell people watching live or through the rewind a little bit about what you do? Like, what do you collect?
Yeah, so I started collecting back, I remember very vividly, in 1986. Unfortunately, I didn't collect Flir basketball, which for those of you who might know is when Michael Jordan's kind of key rookie card is. The one that just sold, I think, for $750,000. That was not me. I started collecting Topps baseball cards, wildly overproduced. And I actually have been collecting on and off probably then for about 30, I guess, 5 years now. And a large portion of that has actually overlapped with this degenerate Alonzo here. We actually met at Frank and Son's collectible show way back in the day. That's actually how we became friends. So we were collecting through the years of Ichiro, Pujols, LeBron. Unfortunately, I don't think either of us was smart enough to keep that stuff. So, but yeah, like we were also collecting comic cards, and I've kind of kept an eye on the pulse of the market. And I think over the last couple of years, there's definitely been a resurgence in interest. And now it's sort of kind of spilled over to the comic book market, if you will. And that's kind of why I brought it up with Alonzo, and I think why you guys are having me on here to talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks so much, Sam. Over to you, JR.
JR, your resident butthead, Marvel fan, DC fan, Star Wars fan. I actually collected baseball cards back in the 80s too. But like you guys, I didn't really keep them in great condition, that stuff. I never put them in the spokes of my tires of my car or my bicycle, but I definitely collected back then, probably 85. And then I started doing did Marvel and all that stuff in the early 90s when they came out. I even remember collecting the Spider-Man set, God forbid.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What is wrong with you?
It ended up getting me a Deadpool, first appearance of Deadpool, so I'm happy. I ended up having one of the foil chase cards out of that set that I ended up trading to a guy for a long box of comics, and Deadpool was in there, so hey, it works out.
Wow, nice. And thank you for that, JR. And as you guys know, this is Alonzo, aka Comics and Pops. I am your comic book nerd, and I also collected a whole bunch of other stuff, as you guys know, pop culture related. We're also sports cards, just anything and everything under the sun. I just love that whole aspect of just collecting stuff, owning sets, and just kind of having fun with it. So let's just kind of get started with all of this stuff. So Sam, you kind of mentioned earlier about your history with sports cards, and now you're kind of looking at all of these comic book related trading cards. How did that happen?
It was a little bit of a circuitous route to this point. So I'll take you back maybe a couple years ago. People started kind of talking about sports cards potentially being a alternative investment, that people were going to look for other ways to essentially, like, let's say, bet on teams, right, or bet on players, and that sports cards were a viable alternative to do that. And so over the last, let's say year and a half, that's really, really taken shape. So the basketball card market has gone absolutely bananas. Cards of GOATs like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, are fetching upwards of like $500,000 or higher. And a couple other things have started to happen. So in the marketplace, you've had what they call fractional ownership companies like a Rally, companies like a Collectible. What they go out and they do is they go out and buy these high grade, and we'll talk about grading companies later, these high grade cards. And what they do then is they then make them publicly available for a person to purchase a fractional share or fractional ownership of that individual item. You also have companies that are essentially hedge funds that are just dedicated to trading cards. They've gotten seed money. They're out there. They're just, they say, hey, I've got $15 million. I'm going to go out and I'm going to spend this money, right? I'm just going to hold this stuff. And so that's happened in the basketball card market. It's happened in like the football card market. It's happened in soccer. It's really only a matter of time, honest to God, until people start to set their sights on other areas. So pop culture has been one of the areas now that has started to see that flow into. I think the very first set actually that started to get a little the buzz was 1977 Star Wars. And then after that set took off, then people kind of started to turn their attention to like, what is the next big pop culture thing that I need to look at? 1990 Marvel has kind of become the thing that's got a lot of buzz.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of crazy how all of this stuff kind of happened. I mean, do these also investors look at these cards, do you think, for long-term investment or something that's like you own it and then kind of flip it?
Completely, right? It's so for these companies, and this isn't what's happening yet in the Marvel market, right? It could eventually spill over. But at least for the trading card market in general, yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. So they're going out, they're buying these things, and they're essentially cornering the market, right? So it's like, if I know that there are only like 100 copies of something out there, and it's very desirable, I'm going to go out, I'm going to buy a bunch of these copies, I'm going to take them out of circulation, and then what happens is that dries up the supply. Then they can put them back out on the market, and now like they control the supply. So whoever wants one is now going to pay, generally speaking, that higher price. And the crazy thing is that the demand is there. And it's not just like, it's not from the average Joes like any of us. It's like the athletes, the millionaires, the hedge fund guys, they're the ones, right, that are driving a lot of this. And then there's a kind of a trickle down effect because then people hear about this stuff and they're like, oh, I want a piece of that. Like, how do I get into that game kind of thing?
Wow. Okay, that's pretty crazy. We actually have one question right now from Rudy. He's wanting to know, and I don't know if you know off the top of your head, Sam. Like, he wants to know the 1994 Marvel Masterpiece, just box by itself. Do you happen to know like the price it's going for now, and do you see any potential in that?
So I don't know off the top of my head the 94. I just happened to check actually the 92 Skybox Marvel Masterpieces sealed box. So not quite the same, but I know the most recent sales of the 92 Skybox Marvel Masterpieces have gone for $750 sealed each.
Whoa.
94 probably going to be less than that. One option for the viewers out there and the listeners, if they want to check, because a lot of times eBay, they'll give you like completed sales, but they won't give you like a best offer completed sales. So one site that I love to go to is 130point.com/sales. So 130point.com/sales. And you can check. You can just literally Google, or sorry, not Google, but just put into the search bar there, 1994 Marvel Masterpieces sealed box, and you'll see what it comes up for. So I'm sure it's at least a couple $100 easily.
Wow, that's actually pretty good. Wow. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So right now, like the market again for these comic book trading cards, specifically just Marvel itself. I mean, what do you look for? I mean, like if you do have a card right now that you can kind of show us to kind of, at least kind of help us out as far as like, what to kind of look for a little bit, to kind of help us out. Because I know a lot of us, myself included, like have a lot of these Marvel cards at home. So I would always like to know, like, hey, is this something that is worth grading or something that isn't? Because I mean, I know looking at auctions and stuff like that, I mean, honestly, I think, oh, I have a card, I have this magic card right here, and I think I can get $500 for it, but that's not true. I mean, it's only true if it's graded, correct?
That's correct, and this is probably a good point, a good part of the show, right? To sort of disclose that I have good recent experience with this because Alonzo actually told me, he's like, oh, I've got 4 complete sets of this 1990 Marvel stuff. I think it's in really good condition. I was like, oh, great, bring it over. And he had stored it in binders, I think like most of us had done, right? These 9-pocket pages. And I came in and I took a look at it and they were discolored and the corners are dinged or they're really off centered. So yeah, actually that's a great point. So I do have a copy of it. This is a 1991
Give me 1 second here.
Marvel. So this is a series 2. So this is not.
Sam.
Give me 1 second.
1 second, Sam. We're gonna make you
I'm
the star.
Trying to make you the star, Sam.
We're gonna make you the star.
Give me a sec here.
No
Oops,
problem.
wrong one.
Oh, hi again.
It's not wanting me to do the one I wanted. There we go.
There you go.
All right.
You are the star. Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so I'm holding up a 1991 Marvel, so not 1990. But when we talk about cards and talk about grading and whether or not you want to consider bringing this in, right? One of the first thing is just overall eye appeal. So when you look at it, right, does the card just generally just to the naked eye, does it look pretty good, right? So that's just a very general statement. And for 1990 specifically, right, one of the ways you can talk about eye appeal is those have white borders. And so if you have something that has kind of become discolored or yellowish, immediately I would just kind of take it out of consideration, right? So let's assume that you've got, it meets the just sort of general eye appeal, right? Next thing you want to look for is centering. So the companies are all big on centering. That's a big key criteria. You want, as much as possible, to have the centering be 50-50, like left to right and top to bottom. They do make allowances, like up to, I believe it's 60-40 on one side or the other. But the further off you get from 50-50, the less margin you have for error in other places to try and get the elusive highest score. So that is the first criteria is centering. And it's front centering and also back centering as well. So the allowance for the back is a little larger than the front, but it's key for both. The other thing you want to take a look at is you actually want to take a look at the corners here. You want to make sure the corners are sharp. So you want 4 sharp corners, if at all possible.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing you want to look for is the edges. So the 4 edges that are here, the edges also need to go ahead and be sharp. You don't want any dings, scratches, anything like that. And then speaking of scratches, surface too. So you want to make sure that basically you hold it up to a light. You don't want to see any kind of surface scratches because they'll also ding you for that. Wow, so those are probably the biggest key things.
Wow, that's a lot, and we'll kind of we'll talk about that a little bit later. We have a deck that kind of has all of that stuff, but that's a lot of information. Is there kind of like a rule of thumb that you would use to kind of help out with that? Like just any kind of a person digging through the garage. I know you mentioned like binders are if it wasn't a binder, you probably have to double check it because it probably wasn't the best place to put these.
Yeah.
Any other common things that as a noob or as an experienced collector to kind of look for, once they're digging around in their garage, basement, or attic?
Yeah, so I think like you have to be wary of things like, the water damage. That's always a big thing. You have to be careful that your cards don't brick. And what I mean by brick is that they stick together. Because yes, you can peel them apart. You can try and kind of crack them and bend them. But what will happen is as you peel them apart, they will actually take off some of the color from the card that it's attached to as well. In a perfect world, if your cards were sleeved and those penny sleeves, and then like put probably like in one of those cardboard boxes, that is probably your best bet for those cards being in what I would consider to be good grading shape. That being said, one of the things I will throw out there is when we talk about like having, let's say, a PSA 10 or the highest graded standard for an individual card, I think the rate of getting that highest grade is something like somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 to 25%, usually for most cards. Okay. So even for people who have been doing this for quite a while, have more of a background in professional sports cards and have been looking at these for a long time, it's not that high. And as you might imagine, if people start going and rummaging for their 1990 cards, people are going to be like, "Oh, hey, I think this is a gem. I think this is great." Right? So you have to be very, very prudent about looking at that.
So, is there any cards that are like a Kobe rookie or a Shaq rookie that we should be looking for to see if we have?
Yeah, so 1990. So if we stick to 1990 specifically, okay. So Alonzo has jumped ahead here. It's 91. So yeah, so Deadpool. So everybody's looking for rookie cards, right? Which is kind of a funny thing for comic book characters. But What he's showing you here, so in X-Force #1, in the polybagged versions, Deadpool has a rookie card, if you will. It was, I think, one of 6 or so different cards made available in those.
I think it was 5 in the set, but yeah.
5? Okay. Yeah,
5.
so you want to look for that Deadpool. I know the most recent example, graded Gem Mint, there have been 2 recent sales in the last probably week and a half. The first one went for 4K.
Wow.
The most recent one went for 2,000. I would expect it to probably trickle down because right now supply is really tight, and as supply starts to flow into the market, realistically the prices will come down. But still, that's a really good one. If you want to talk about 1990, the key ones there, the Stan Lee, so the Mr. Marvel, that's a big one. I think the most expensive recorded sale for a single right now, though, is the Black Panther. I think one sold for like 3K.
Whoa.
Black Panther's key. I believe there are 3 Spider-Mans as individual cards there in 1990. All of those would be big ones. Iron Man, Hulk. Essentially, basically, like anybody who is an Avenger, effectively, is one of the key cards there. And then I think like Wolverine is a big one as well.
Okay. No, thanks a lot, Sam. I mean, and that's a great question, JR. So before we get into the deck, does anybody on the live chat have any questions that we can kind of answer for you guys? I know we've been kind of talking about kind of rummaging through your garage or attic or basement, kind of just trying to find these cards and what to kind of look for. And I know like a lot of us have these cards or save them. I, for one, had these cards in binders, and they're horrible. They stuck to the plastic. And then, I had Sam take a look at them, and some of them had like little indents because of the binders and the holders. So, I mean, that's, it's kind of rough.
Well, it sounds like you had yours doubled up too, right?
I did. I had them like one facing one way and then facing the other. So I had 2 cards back to back.
Because that's what he meant by bricking, right, Sam?
Yeah, it's a little less prevalent, I think, with so 1990 and 1991, the material they used, there wasn't a lot of kind of like foil. So typically those are not as bad as bricking. I know that 92 Marvel Masterpieces is bad at bricking. I think Alonzo just saw an example of that the other day when he found some. And I would imagine, I know like earlier, JR, you and I were talking about 94 Marvel Masterpieces as well. I think that one had kind of like a heavy foil, and that's one of those ones where 25 years or whatever later, those are probably going to brick as well.
Thankfully, with mine, because it's a thicker stock, I wasn't able to put 2 cards. You weren't able to put 2 back to back, so shouldn't brick as much.
Yeah, even some of the ones that I had, I actually had them in boxes, but the like Marvel box that it came in. And I just, kind of stacked them together thinking, oh, no big deal. Like, I have it. But then when I pulled them out, they were stuck together. Like you had to like,
well, that's moisture and everything too.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say for your listeners and your viewers, like in terms of, because we talked about, right, how do you look for these things? So one thing, because I know not everybody has 20/20 eyesight, and even if you do, it's still not going to be as good as like someone with a magnifying glass. You can go on to like eBay or Amazon and buy something like they call a jeweler's loop. So this is what jewelers use, right, when they're like looking at gems. They usually provide somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20x magnification. You can find them for like less than $10. You go on, buy one of those, look at your card through a jeweler's loop, because that will expose flaws that your naked eye cannot see. If it passes the test of the jeweler's loop, then you have a much better shot of getting that highest grade. So that's just kind of a quick and easy way to do it. They also have combinations of like a lamp with a magnifying glass. Some people prefer that because they don't like looking through the jeweler's loop. So that's just kind of a tip for your listeners, viewers, if they want to really get into looking at these things at scale.
Wow.
What about if you use your phone? Because your phone can magnify. Was there a difference between the two?
It kind of depends on the magnification that you get with the phone. If you can get to that at least 10x, I believe professional graders are using somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 30, if I remember correctly.
I know like the newest Samsung is like one of them's 30 and one of them's 100 time magnification. So that's why I was.
Oh yeah, no, that would be great if you want to just use technology already at your disposal to do that. Absolutely, go for it.
Okay. So just for the people in the live chat, so Sam is really good at assessing cards. I mean, he knows what to look for. I mean, he has the tools, and I mean, he's picked out a lot of PSA 10s. I mean, to be perfectly honest, and again, this is my opinion, all he gets are 10s. I mean, that's how I look at it. Sam, did you want to show one of your PSA 10s?
Yeah, sure. I can show one of you guys. Can show you guys what a PSA 10 looks like. I don't know. Sorry, the glare. There we go. So this is Kobe Bryant, my favorite athlete. This is actually one of his available rookie cards. You'll see the company there. I think we'll talk about it later. PSA, and then the grade Gem Mint 10. So you get your 1990 Marvels cards if you're lucky enough to get them encased in this PSA 10. You're looking at a very healthy return on something that we all collected as kids.
I know, and I know we're all looking to get rich, doing this, because I mean, all of us comic book nerds, we have these sets, we have these cards. So I mean, I know realistically speaking, we're probably not going to make a down payment with raw cards on a house. So we'll kind of get into that really quickly, but before we do, let's jump into the deck where we kind of just sum up a little bit of what we've kind of talked about, and also get into a little bit more detail. All right, so here we go. So one of the things that Sam had mentioned, and again, we're all comic book nerds. We're all familiar with CGC. We kind of know what to look at. We kind of look at the spine, the corners, see if there's any ticks or color breaks. I mean, that's what we do to find like something that's a 9.8 or higher. The same can also be said with comic book trading cards. As Sam mentioned, I mean, the four corners are the first thing you should look at. Or excuse me, not the first thing. Again, it's eye appeal. But one of the things is, again, look at the corners. Look also at, is a card centered? And not only just looking at the front, but also look at the back of the card. And you also have to look again at the corners. And again, see if it's centered. And you can tell on this particular one, if you look at the upper left, some of the paint on that red looks like it's off. And again, edging is also very important as well. And you can kind of see there's been some sort of rub. So it's similar to like a comic book where it's a comic book rub or like a color break. So again, these are the kind of things that you need to kind of look for. Wouldn't you agree, Sam?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
So wouldn't you agree that, I mean, just kind of looking at a card, going through your collection, like if you want to submit it or do something with it, just to kind of, with a naked eye, look, these are the things you kind of look for.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much like if it doesn't pass the naked eye test, it's not going to pass further scrutiny. So, right, you just kind of make two piles right at the start. It's like, okay, these look like I want to evaluate them further. They go in one pile. These are just like, all right, I see this corner is white. This edge is like bent. This thing is like way off centered. That goes into another pile for sure.
So Sam, when you get, let's say go and say, oh, I want to get this new set or whatever. How many boxes of whatever do you go out and buy at one time? And how many how many make it to the first round of your scrutiny of 10s, would you say, in a box?
So, it's going to depend, right? So if we're talking about like the early, right, the 1990 stuff, the thing that killed 1990 Marvel is the centering more than anything else. So 1990 Marvel pretty much is notorious for having large runs where the centering is like no better than 60-40 one side. And then it's even worse with the holograms. I think we all kind of remember the holograms were just like just atrociously centered. Where, you know, like I've seen like the Magnetos, the Spider-Mans, it looks like 90% of the image is on one side of the card. Yeah, so I would probably say that, you know, from a corners perspective and surface, those are all pretty good. They're going to kind of pass the initial test if you're just looking at that. But if you really just look at, hey, look at it and you look at the centering, you're going to probably eliminate a large chunk of that. I was reading actually on some of the message boards that where people were actually opening fresh boxes of 1990 Marvel, and people were pulling out, you know, I think a box had something like 430 cards in there. People were pulling out like less than 10 or 20 that they would send for PSA 10 of like the key guys. So, yeah.
Wow. And then we have a quick question. Sam wants to know, do you think, or are there like Star Wars Decipher cards? Do you think they're gaining value, or is there any kind of like speculation for that?
So I can't speak to the Decipher cards specifically, but what I will say is that pretty much any, like right now, Star Wars as a property is definitely getting a lot of attention. Specifically the 77 set, that's where a lot of the heat is right now. And I would imagine that it'll actually trickle over into other, you know, other Star Wars property type cards. So definitely Star Wars. Yeah, I would say like if you've got something there, whatever you do, just keep it in good condition. And you know what, if you think you want to send them in for grading and they look good, we can talk about more this specifically more later. Go ahead and send them in now.
And the Decipher cards are the old CGC game, right? Or collectible card game? Okay. No,
yeah, I'm not.
I think that's what they were.
So I wouldn't know. I didn't collect any of the Star Wars stuff. I wish I did though. I think I might have like some old Return of the Jedi trading cards, but I know they're like in horrible shape. I use a rubber
those
band
are all tops
to kind of keep them together, you know. So I know they're bad. I totally know they're bad.
If it makes you feeling better, there's a printing error on this one I'm seeing right now, because it's got Hulk 180 as first appearance, and we all know that's wrong. So,
oh man.
But yeah, like to the original question, right? I mean, it's pretty much anything that's really big, popular pop culture. It's going to have its moment. It's already having its moment. So like, I know we're not here. I know this is comics, right? But the next kind of area that a lot of people are already starting to turn their attention to is Harry Potter, right? Another big pop culture franchise. So,
whoa, did they have cards for those?
Harry Potter, yeah, they actually did. They had trading cards for each of the movies, and then the Young Stars actually had they had autographs. I think
no way.
Like, Emma Watson is like $2,000.
Wow, that's insane.
I'm just curious, because there used to be, I don't know if this is in the same realm, but they had the sticker cards back in the day. Do either one of you guys remember those, where you buy like a sticker book and put them in there and stuff? Do you think those will ever catch on? Because they had them for like all kinds of stuff.
They will. So stickers are an interesting thing, especially sticker cards. Because most of the collectors for a lot of this stuff, especially for pop culture stuff, are US based, the collectible culture here is much more geared towards cards than it is to stickers. That being said, what happens is, like, if people start to get priced out of cards, a lot of them start to look for like what are other alternatives, and the sticker cards become alternatives because they usually will start off cheaper. So absolutely, and I would say the general rule of thumb is if you have anything from a large pop culture, you know, like a cultural, iconically big franchise, and it's in good condition, keep it, set it aside. You just don't know when it'll get its moment in the sun.
Okay.
No, that's another great question. Thanks a lot, JR.
No problem.
So these are examples of some of the cards. So this is obviously Marvel Card Series 1. And as you can kind of see here, this is very well centered. I mean, if you kind of look at the white borders, I mean, it looks nice. So again, Sam, it passes the eye exam, right? The eye test.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it's still white. It doesn't look like it has any of the yellowing. And then the way it's framed, you can see like top to bottom, left to right. It looks pretty close to 50-50, maybe not exactly spot on, but definitely passes the immediate eye test for centering.
Awesome. And then also too, you mentioned holograms, and I know that somebody else on the chat, I think it might have been Rudy, mentioned his hologram, and here we go. I mean, this thing looks so off-centered. Like, it is so bad.
Yeah.
But then I have a question for you, Sam. I mean, just kind of looking at it, I mean, the corners look good. The edges look good as well. And then the surface, it looks like it's nice. Would you submit this card?
So this comes down to, at this point, first of all, the centering will probably knock you down about 2 grades from what your max grade could be. So on a 1 to 10 grading scale, which is what PSA uses, this is probably going to knock you down at least 2 grades, right? So you're looking at an 8. That being said, that as long as everything else you think is pretty much close to perfect, then an 8 from an economics perspective, yes, absolutely, would still make sense to grade this card. The other thing to note about the holograms, though, is that if you holograms are very reflective, right? So they also show their defects very, very clearly. If you hold this up to the light and you get the holographic effect, I think a lot of these were actually known for having like blackout spots, if you will, where the hologram wasn't perfect. And also the surface scratches super easily. So it'll be scuffed up quite a bit. So yeah, there's potential, but you need to make sure that everything else is pretty much in tip-top shape.
So it needs to be 10s all around. If it has a flaw, otherwise it's not worth your time or your money to submit it to grading, right?
In this particular case, yeah, right. I mean, you think about it like you start with perfection, and anything that immediately dings it, right? Now you're the highest possible grade you can get is a lot lower. So,
okay. And then just another example, and this goes back to what we looked at originally, which was the Mr. Marvel Stan Lee card. And one of the things that Sam had noticed or noted was the corners dinged, and then the edging is a problem. And it looks like it might be some color rub or it might be some scuffing.
Yep.
So again, just kind of check your cards. And let's get into it. So there's a number of grading services that are players right now. And I took the big 3. There's a lot of other ones that do some grading, but these are the ones that are probably the best well-known, being PSA, BGS, and also now CGC is getting into that market. Sam, what's the difference between the 3 or the 2 or the big 2, which is again PSA and Beckett, and why would you pick one over the other?
So the PSA is pretty much like the gold standard right now of the 3 that you listed. And as you mentioned, there's probably like a couple other ones. I think SGC is probably the other most prominent one that is not on the slide. So the reason to go PSA, be perfectly honest, PSA has the best resale value. It's the one that people want. So if investors are looking to buy something, they're going to want a PSA 10, and the 10 is the highest grade on their scale. Beckett is also a big one. I don't think they're necessarily as big for comic cards. They're definitely in the sports card trading world, not so much comics. They are known typically for because they actually have a grading scale that's very unique that I think actually CGC kind of copied, where they actually will they give you subgrades on each of these areas. So we talked about centering, right? We talked about the corners, we talked about the edges, we talked about the surface. So those are Beckett's actual 4 grading areas, and they will give you individual subgrades for theirs. So in that case, like you will know, like, oh, hey, if mine only got like an overall 9. Why was it? Was it because the corners were bad? Was it because the edges were bad, etc.? A lot of people like Beckett because a 9.5 in Beckett, which is their 3rd highest grade, a lot of times is quote unquote equivalent to a PSA 10, but from a cost perspective, it's something like half of that. So if you're more of a collector and you would just like a very mint copy of something, you could go Beckett. CGC is the new kid on the trading card block, trying to take the kind of the cachet they have from the comic space and move into trading cards. I see some of their stuff right now. I think like an equivalently graded CGC card is probably fetching maybe like 40 to 50% of a PSA 10 at the same high grade. The thing, and we can kind of discuss more about this later. So another of the big differences right now probably is going to be turnaround time to actually get your stuff graded. So PSA, because they're the king, everybody wants to get their stuff graded by PSA, which means essentially that there is a flood of cards at PSA right now. I've heard rumor numbers that the backlog of cards waiting to be graded at PSA is close to 3 million.
Wow.
3 million cards in the backlog. Yeah. And Beckett isn't great either. Beckett has a backlog too, and they just raised their prices. CGC is the newer kid on the block, probably can get your stuff turned around faster, but even if you get the stuff back faster, you're not going to get as much for it on the market. So you have to kind of weigh that. Like, would you rather get it back faster, be one of the first to market, maybe be willing to leave some money on the table in case this is all a big passing fad, or are you going to go for top dollar, but be willing to either wait it out for PSA to return your cards, or pay money, like more money, right, to kind of express your cards and get them back faster to you.
Wow. So, Sam, we have another question, and actually it's from Sam. How much does it cost roughly for the grading? Do you by any chance know the pricing between PSA and Beckett?
So I know the PSA, so because of the era so PSA has their cheapest option is called a bulk. And bulk right now, I think it's about $10 per card, but the estimated turnaround times being given by people are 6 to 12 months for bulk.
Wow.
But that is the cheapest, $10.
Wow.
Now, they also have options going all the way up to, honestly, like thousands of dollars. But like Express, which right now is supposed to take, it's about 3 to 4 weeks, is anywhere from $65 to $75 a card.
Wow. So just again, a PSA announcement, not PSA grading. And Sam mentioned this earlier. You need to weigh your options. Like, if you think a card is worth it to get top dollar, you might want to go that route in order to get that fast return. Or it's something that's like a slow burn, which you can kind of forecast or speculate on. Then you would probably go with the lower tier with the PSA.
So when you do bulk, is it only one card? I mean, I always say it's $10 per card, but is there like do you have to do like 20? Because usually when you hear bulk, it means a big volume. So do they make you do a certain amount when you do that one, or?
Yes, yeah, you have options. So if you can submit yourself to PSA, for instance, right? I'll just keep using the PSA example. You can submit yourself. You do need to have a membership that you need to pay for. And you can submit yourself through bulk, and I believe it's a 20 card minimum.
Okay.
However, there are what they call group submissions, or group subbers is the slang, who will submit cards for you at that bulk service level, and they have no minimum. So you could literally just mail them one card if you want and say, this is all I got. I want to do it at the bulk level, and I'll wait 6 months to a year for it. That's fine. There are plenty of options out there for people.
Okay.
Oh, that's great questions.
Do you think CGC will ever catch up to PSA? Because, I mean, they kind of took over the market in comics.
If I'm honest, no. I think, competition is good for people, but CGC is going into a space that is already really crowded, right? With PSA, with Beckett. Both have established reputations in the trading card industry. Both of them have very loyal customers. They've graded millions upon millions of cards. And right now, what has to change in order for that to happen is the buyers basically have to say, I don't want a PSA 10, or I'm not willing to pay so much for that. I would much rather have like the CGC equivalent. I don't know if CGC for cards, if their top grade is like a 9. I think they probably give out 10s, but like most of the time it's going to be like a 9-8 probably, right? Similar to what they do for comic books. This is kind of a small thing, but I actually think that's a big flaw for them in terms of why. That's another little psychological reason why they may never catch PSA. One of the reasons why PSA is so popular with people is a lot of people think that PSA uses a 1 to 10 system. Just they only have whole number grades. And it's very easy to say, I have a PSA 10 and say, that's the best of the best. when you're holding something that's like, hey, I have a Beckett 9.5 or a CGC 9.8, like these kind of fractional or decimal grades, they just don't carry the same weight for people as saying I have a 10 of something.
Yeah, it's very psychological, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also I want to say, doesn't CBCS, don't they own Beckett, or aren't I want to say they're connected to a sports card company also. And I might be wrong on that.
No, I believe you're right, JR. I believe that Beckett and was it CBCS?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a partnership. So one takes care of the comic book grading, and the other one takes care of the card grading.
Okay.
All right. So enough about the grading companies, but again, we'll kind of get into that as well. This is what we came to talk about, really, and it's these Marvel cards Series 1. So some of the cards that just kind of picked here are the ones that to kind of watch out for. And I know that the Stan Lee Mr. Marvel one is essentially a no-brainer. But you have all these other ones that to kind of look for. I mean, surprisingly, like She-Hulk is another popular pick, and you really wouldn't think so maybe a few months ago, or maybe even like last year for this particular card. But again, with all the buzz that's happening with the She-Hulk Disney Plus series, I mean, you need to kind of look at your cards in such a way to kind of forecast them. So besides like these kind of cards we have here, Sam, should we also be looking at these like not only just the holograms, but some of the subsets like rookies or these other alternatives?
Absolutely. These so far in the early going, granted, right? A lot of these, the values that we've seen so far are based on the very limited supply of these high grade cards that we have. I would certainly expect as word starts to trickle out, right, through you guys' podcast, through just kind of the internet, people are going to go looking for this stuff. They're going to go submit en masse the PSA, and right, the supply is going to increase. So that might sort of change, right, the math on these things. But at least for right now, yes. The answer is yes. So in the rookie subset, you have the Guardians of the Galaxy rookie card, if you will. And I know a PSA, I think 10 copy of that, or a PSA 9 copy of that sold for $200. Anything with like Spider-Man, so I think the key battles like Spider-Man Venom, right? Anything basically with Spider-Man, even the Spider-Man Tales one, right? Where it's like Spider-Man like talks to Iron Man, he basically introduces himself, and like Dr. Doom, those are all fetching like really, really good money in high grade. So absolutely.
You can't hate on Spider-Man there, JR.
Yeah, you can. Very easily. I have no problem sleeping at night. And also to go back to the Guardians thing, you're talking about the original Guardians too, correct? Because the one that we all know and love with Rocket Raccoon and all that didn't come out until 2000s sometime. So this is the original one with Astro Vance, and I can't remember the other characters' names, but Astro Vance and all of them, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. This is not the current Marvel iteration that James Gunn kind of put on film for us all. Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out in case somebody's looking for those cards and sees it, goes, "Oh, you must be talking about different Guardians." Like, no, you got the right one. If you don't see the Rocket Raccoon on there, you got the right one.
Yeah. So again, we're all comic book nerds here, so we kind of know already. So at least we have, at the very minimum, a head start. From all of the other like sports card collectors and stuff like that, because we know this material. I mean, we know what's hot. We know what's coming up. Because we're in the know. We live and breathe like this comic book culture. So this is something that all of us can do. I mean, we should all know, like, hey, Spider-Man's hot. He's going to have a movie. We know that She-Hulk's going to have a series. We know that Fantastic Four was mentioned, and who knows, maybe it could pop in WandaVision. We don't know, but Doctor Doom is going to be a hot commodity or a hot property. Same thing with the mutants. I mean, we all know Wolverine is like the hot mutant. So I mean, stuff like this, we know this. This is us. So we should be able to get ahead of a lot of these things by either submitting them via PSA or Beckett, or just kind of like, just even putting them raw up on any kind of site, or just kind of, keeping them to ourselves, right?
I think that's a great point, and that a lot of that kind of stuff also plays out in the sports card world as well, where once the masses kind of catch on to something, right? Then at that point, it maybe is like a little too late for you to kind of capitalize, if you will, if you're really looking to be kind of like an investor or maximize potentially, let's say, your profits. Your eye is already wandering to like what's 2 or 3 steps ahead, right? So like, what is the rumored series that's going to come down the pike, or the movie, who's going to be the next character to get featured. And then to Alonzo's point, that's an opportunity for you potentially to buy like quantities of a card, or look for something in bulk, and then send it out and get it graded, so that by the time that news breaks, you're sitting already with the inventory of the stuff that everyone's going to want.
Yeah.
Cool. So with that in mind, moving on to the next wave of Marvel cards, what are your thoughts? I mean, we have Marvel Masterpieces, we have the Marvel Card Series 2 and 3, and then we also have the Jim Lee X-Men. What do you think, Sam? I mean, are these good investments? I mean, are these like, should we get these graded right away? I mean, are these like flippable? I mean, educate us here.
I'll do the best that I can, just from my observation. But yeah, I mean, if I take a look at what you've got on here, we tend to see this right in other markets, but there is definitely a spillover effect. Like, what happens is, once people kind of look and the primary target gets a little too expensive, or people think, hey, you know what, like, I'm priced out of this, or I want to see what is next on the horizon, they will naturally go a lot of times to like the next year, or what potentially have been popular back in the day. So you've got 91 Marvel up there. So 91 Marvel, so the Series 2 is also very popular. So 1990 boxes right now are pretty much clearing 2,500 a piece pretty regularly.
Wow.
At one point,
Really?
at one point, I think last week, they cleared 3,500 pretty regularly. But they've come back down to like somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,500 to $3,000. 91 has, I believe, I haven't checked recent sales, but I know 91 had gotten to about $700 or $800 a box for that. So there's kind of like your natural spillover. I can't get 1990, so I'm going to go to kind of the next one, 91. The picture on the left there, 92 Marvel Masterpieces. So that now is a $750 a box product. Series 3, so your Quasar card there. I think now that it's a couple $100. It hasn't quite taken off to the stratosphere, which is kind of, I think, expected. It's the third, sort of series, if you will. So it's not the original. It doesn't have that same appeal. The further removed you usually get from, right, kind of like the flagship series, unless there are like key character rookie cards, if you will, that are in there, first appearance
like
cards.
A Jordan card.
It's probably going to always kind of lag behind. The X-Men series, Deadpool's in there, but Deadpool is also in 91, like in the poly bag of X-Force #1, so that's not quite his true rookie. If he wasn't in that poly bagged one, I would say the 92 Deadpool Jim Lee X-Men probably has more potential. A couple other ones one of the ones you didn't mention was like also the Precious Metal PMGs. I think in 2013, Upper Deck, they did a Flir retro series where they essentially took a lot of the concepts that were introduced in sports cards and they applied them to comic book characters. So you have these things called Precious Metal Gems for Spider-Man, Venom, essentially like these very full bleed color metallic cards. Hugely popular. There's another site called like Jambalaya that's hugely popular. So those were always highly collectible though, but now they're getting like renewed interest. So those are more expensive to start with, but those are also getting a lot of interest. And then the other one that I saw recently that I think is starting to catch a little fire is a 95 Marvel Metal. I don't know if either of you guys remember that one, but
I
that
vaguely
also
remember the name.
Yeah, vaguely
is
do.
doing well.
So I'm just curious, like, to go back to the Jim Lee X-Men.
Yeah.
Let's say at some point, because I keep saying DC's going to get sold, and I think before that happens, Jim Lee's contract, he's going to be let go. If Jim Lee was to leave DC, hypothetically, because you got to kind of think a couple steps ahead. If Jim Lee was to hypothetically leave DC and go back to do freelance and doing Marvel stuff, would that spike that Marvel card setup? Would that force
I would
it to go up?
imagine it would definitely spark like interest in anything Jim Lee did for Marvel or for X-Men and specifically, right? Because that's probably what he's most attached to from the Marvel perspective. So yeah, I would imagine so. The challenge with the Jim Lee, the 92 X-Men set, just from the way the collectors tend to think, or even investors, is that is not like the first appearance of Gambit.
Right.
Like Gambit has a card right in previous Marvel issues. Wolverine, right? He's got the thing. So that's a little bit of the challenge with the 92. Is like I don't know that people are going to automatically, gravitate towards that 92 set.
Okay.
So, what do you think is next? Do you think DC is going to get some love? I know probably not from JR, but I mean from the comic book collector or like these investors. What do you think?
I actually collected this set back in the day. This is when DC was good.
So DC has already gotten love, right? It's this whole spillover effect. So what people were like, hey, 1990, Marvel, all right, now this is too expensive. Where can I go? Hey, you know what? There's DC is the other big like creator of a comic book universe. Do they have cards? When are their cards? So the answer is yes. The boxes, you could have gotten boxes of this stuff. I mean, this stuff was mass produced. You could have gotten boxes of this stuff for like $15 a box, maybe like 6 months ago, right?
15?
Even as recently as like 3 months ago or something like that. These boxes are now going for like $300 a piece.
Yeah. So, wow. So do you, in your opinion, again, you're a speculator just like the rest of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we can see do you think DC will get up to where Marvel is right now, Marvel Series 1? I mean, do you see like $700, $1,000 just for a box?
Yeah. So full disclosure, right? I had some of these boxes. I bought them like earlier on because I kind of made that, hey, what's next move? I went from Marvel to DC, but I sold my boxes recently that I had of this. And so for me, the answer is, I think no. The biggest kind of strike against the 91 DC cards is there's no Batman in here.
What? There's no Batman?
No, this is the cosmic universe. So you've got Green Lantern, you got Flash, you have Superman, Wonder Woman. There's no Batman. There's no Robin. There's no Joker. Whoa. So probably DC's arguably their most popular character isn't in here. If he was, then I think there would be a lot of potential. But because he's missing, yeah, no.
Was he in the next set?
So I think they actually had a standalone set where they did one specifically for Batman and Robin and his universe. So I think that one even has probably seen an uptick, but it's unfortunate that Batman wasn't in the 91.
So they had Nightwing in there. They had Nightwing in there because we see it on the screen, but they didn't have Batman or Robin.
That's correct.
That is dumb.
Oh my God, DC! What the hell were you thinking?
You wonder why I make fun of DC so much.
Even Steve's like, "How dare they?"
Now I remember also. I want to say, at one point we had a Wildcat set.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like Image, right?
I think Wildcat had its own set. I want to say there was like a Youngblood or
Spawn
some Rob
had one.
Spawn one. I want to say there was some Rob Liefeld one. Who?
Yeah. I even want to say like there was I thought there was like a previous quote unquote like Deadpool one too, even that was like a standalone one. My memory could be failing me, but I thought there was something. But so that's actually an interesting point is if you think about it from a comic card perspective, 1990 isn't actually even the first Marvel cards, right? I think there's like a 1966 vintage of Marvel cards, I believe. that you can find out there as well. But I think most people have kind of zeroed in on 1990 Marvel as the set to collect. That's the one they're very most nostalgic with. The parallel I would sort of draw, and maybe this is lost on on some of the comic book folks, but 1986, we'll kind of bring it back full circle. 1986 Flir, Michael Jordan. That's not actually his rookie card, but it's his most iconic card, and that's the one people want. But if you actually just look a year earlier, in 1985, he has this company called Star manufactured Michael Jordan cards. And so they would probably be his rookie cards, but which one has more value than 1986 Flir? So yeah, when you think about some of these other ones, right, like some of these other guys might have previous appearances, but 1990 is going to be, that's the one the market has basically already identified as the one that they want to collect.
So basically the Hulk 181 argument. Because everyone looks at 180 as technically the first appearance, but 181 is what we all have set standard as this is the first appearance. And that's one's worth money.
Yeah.
It's madness. Madness. Not with this
I saw a quick comment come in there around 1099Ks. So can I talk about that really quick?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Sis has a lot of knowledge.
Yeah, so 1099K, right? For the most part, with the exception of a couple states where the thresholds are really low, 1099K you will get one if you clear 2 thresholds from eBay, which is 200 transactions plus $20,000 of transactions. So you have to clear both of those in order to get one from eBay. From PayPal, it's the same thing. Now, eBay and PayPal actually split late last year. So if you transact some on eBay and you transact some on PayPal, you have separate thresholds for each. So before it was sort of, you were entangled. Like if you did business on eBay, you were by default basically doing business with PayPal. And so you get a 1099K. But now eBay has its own managed payment system. So the thresholds are separate.
And on the tax note, just because I'm a tax man, in the state of California, even if you don't get those, technically you're supposed to, as use tax, you're supposed to put for stuff you bought online and what you made and all that type of stuff. You're supposed to put that on there.
Oh yeah.
I'm not saying not to do it, but I'm just saying it's a voluntary thing to do.
Yes.
Oh, nice. All right, guys. We're kind of getting up to our 1 hour for this particular show. So we definitely have more info for you guys. So you can catch us on same time, same channel next week, if time permits. So we're definitely going to be in there. Does anybody in the chat have any other questions or any other kind of sort of comments in regards to anything that we've talked about today? Oh, look at that. Sam, so what do you think about Star? Did Star have?
I'm assuming he's talking about the 1985 Star basketball set.
Yeah.
So they have really low print runs, but I think it was Sith that kind of commented. One of the challenges with that is that Star also used the same printing plates to then subsequently reprint those cards later on. And there's also counterfeits. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why that 85 Star card probably isn't as popular. Although I have seen quite a lot more like actual graded runs. But yeah, the population on those is actually pretty. The originals is actually pretty low.
Oh, okay. All right. Again, thank you, Comic Fan, for tuning into today's show. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. JR, do you want to take us out?
I was going to say one more thing. Also, leave a comment in our thing. If there's anything you want us to talk about in the future, put it there. That way we can kind of get some information about it and everything of that nature. But other than that, as we always say, if you want to do it right, collect what you like.
Sorry. JR.